Hello, everybody, and welcome to proPUCKERS Episode 7, part of the Tundra Enthusiast News Network. I'm Mike Fink, and I'm joined again by Jim Parsons for the second time ever. This is the first second timer on our show, and we got to have him on because the Oilers have made this a series again. It was 3-0, 3-2 now. Oilers won back-to-back games. So let's start with that, Jim. How have you been feeling the past few days? How's the emotions been? How's everything been?
It's good. I mean, at first I was a little worried that the Oilers weren't going to make this a series. Whether you're cheering for Edmonton or you're cheering for Florida, what you don't necessarily want is the Stanley Cup Final to be a sweep. It just wouldn't have been entertaining. You do all that work to get there, and then for one team to win it in 4 games would have felt really anticlimactic. So the fact that the Oilers have now turned this around a little bit, and it's now 3-2 going into Edmonton, where I don't know if it's right or wrong. People are kind of assuming that the Oilers are going to win this game at home in front of their fans, but that would be something if we thought we were getting a sweep, and now all of a sudden it goes to 7 games. So it is a much better series than when it first started.
Yeah, I mean, this for someone who doesn't have a horse in the race, as I've been saying, for entering the series, I was like, this is going to be fun. Once it looked like it was going to be a sweep, I was like, hope this does not look so great. Now we got a series again, and this has been just great. And the playoffs have been leading up to a great final, and we're like, fingers crossed, we get a great final, we get a series to remember. Now we've got one. And I think the first thing to start with is this, because the series wasn't so great to begin with. It looked like the Panthers controlled things. The games were lopsided. The Oilers really couldn't get anything going. Now this series is flipped. The A1 game it was exciting if you're an Oilers fan. You're just cheering the whole time, but it wasn't so exciting for most fans. Game 5 was just the best game. It might have been the best Stanley Cup final game I've seen in a while for the final game. I mean, I can't remember a final in the final, a game being that memorable. Just Oilers get out early, Panthers come back. You just think like, oh, this could go either way, and the Oilers just claw away with a victory, and the final minute was thrilling. The thing I want to start with is what has changed? What has changed for the Oilers? What have they done differently, or what has really been noticeable that helped flip the series in their favor? Which I think I know. I have my answer. I think you have the same answer.
Yeah.
So you could take it away.
Well, I mean, the first thing is there's scoring, right? Like, I know that you had mentioned that it was mostly Florida at the beginning, but there were games in those first 3 games that the Oilers lost to, the first 3, where the Oilers actually outplayed Florida for good portions of the games, and they had possession time. They just couldn't score. Their power play was 0 for 10. They weren't being able to solve Sergei Bobrovsky, who was playing really, really well. And then in game 4, things kind of switched. The Oilers opened up and blew them out 8-1, got a bunch of stuff past Bobrovsky, and I don't know whether or not that was solving the issue of, don't shoot on his glove side or go high on Bobrovsky, which is kind of the scouting report on him. But the Oilers started scoring, and then in game 5, their power play was 2 for 5, I think it was, and they started getting goals. That was the biggest thing in the beginning. It was that it was just strange for the Edmonton Oilers, who are this offensively dynamic elite team, to not score. They just had, it was like 11-1 for Florida in terms of goals, for and against. So it was really a matter of just Edmonton not being able to get anything in the net. And
I think it was like 4 goals in the first 3 games, which average that's not a lot.
Which is crazy when you think about the fact that the Oilers are the highest scoring team in the playoffs, and we're pretty much the highest scoring team. I think they were 4th in the regular season for goals for. Like, they are just a scoring team. The one thing they know how to do is score, and they were not able to do that against Florida. And again, like the series started in Dallas, the power play was just not effective. They weren't getting anything in. And now that they've started scoring and cashing in on some of those power plays, it's an entirely different series.
It's been, it was like they've averaged 3.5, 6 goals per game during the season. And of course, their offense has been exceptional during the playoffs as well. And it was crazy about the first 3 games. They were getting their shots on net. As you said, they were outplaying the Panthers in the sense like they had possession, they were getting their shots on net, but it did still feel like the Panthers controlled it in the sense like their forecheck was there, their defense was there, really Barkov playing in the middle of the ice. I mean, for me, I just look at the series like, what's the big thing that changed? McDavid's playing the way I think many people thought he was going to play entering the series, and Really, I mean, he's actually just exceeded expectations.
Right.
He has 8 points in the past 2 games, 3 goals and 5 assists. If you want to split that up, and that's really where it starts. Which it's where you think about, okay, the Panthers were doing a good job shutting him down in the first 2 games. Now it's like, now once you give him that space, or once he's getting that space and taking advantage of it, there's no stopping him. And
Yeah.
it feels like we're seeing the best player on the biggest stage doing just the best things, like exceeding expectations, exceeding Wayne Gretzky numbers, exceeding like the greatest we've seen, which is really just incredible to watch, honestly. Like just seeing one player take over a series the way he has in a
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. And when I talk about scoring, I mean, it goes kind of without saying that McDavid's going to be a big part of that. That's absolutely true. The fact that he's got back-to-back 4-point games, that he's broken the record for assists, that he's reaching the milestone for points. It's pretty crazy to suggest that. But part of the reason I didn't specifically just say McDavid was because they're getting some really timely and important goals from other people. Connor Brown has
Yeah.
really picked up his play in the last couple of days. And in that last game, it was Connor Brown, then it was Adam Henrique, and it was people that you didn't necessarily expect to get in on the scoring. Now, on that 8-1 victory, like everybody was in on the scoring, so that's a little
Yeah.
different. But when you need, like, McDavid got the chance to sort of, not, I don't want to say fumble through the first period in the last game, but he wasn't necessarily just explosive like he was in the second and third. And then all of a sudden, once the Oilers got on the board and it was 3-0 on the third goal of the game, it was just the McDavid show from then on in, right? So
Yeah.
they had Connor Brown and they had others sort of picking things up when it took McDavid just a second to get into the game. And then once he was into the game, it was like, okay, Florida's done, right? So, yes, you are right. McDavid has just been all worldly and changed this entire series, but he's getting help. And if you ask him, he'll be the first person to
Yeah.
compliment everybody else, right? Like, he knows he's playing well, but he also knows that that doesn't happen if he's not getting a timely boost on a shorthanded goal from Connor Brown to kick things off, right? Like,
Yeah.
those things are super important too.
And it is important to note that, because you look at the stat sheet from the series, you look at the Oilers, McDavid has 11 points in the series in its entirety, because he had 3 assists in the first 3 games,
Hmm.
but 11 points. And the next player on that list, or the next player who even has more than one goal, is Dylan Holloway.
Yeah.
Or it's I believe Adam Henrique has a goal and assist. There's a lot of players that are getting 2 goals, 2 assists, 1 goal, 3 assists type of thing. Nobody else is really lighting it up, which I guess you could say is a something maybe would want to criticize. Let's say, because you're like, Leon Draisaitl should
Yeah.
be getting more points on the board. He's one of these players that would do it, but it's credit to the Oilers, where you're looking at everyone stepping up. You're looking at the second, third line, or you're looking at the penalty kill, which is now scoring again, which the penalty kill was a strength in the playoffs. We were all like, ironic, isn't it? And now it's showing again. And it really, it speaks to both. I mean, the comeback in the series, the way they've turned the series, speaks both to the star power they have with McDavid, and the depth that people ignore with the Oilers, that is now starting to show and starting to make a difference, and starting to create, really on the offensive end, create offense where they need those few goals. Like, where your stars can't do it all, but you have now a few skaters who are making a difference, especially in in games that are getting closer, like Game 5, where
Yeah.
they don't win that game without Connor Brown scoring one, or they don't have Evan Bouchard getting the blast, which hits off the leg. Forgetting
It
who
was
it hit
Zach
off.
Hyman. Yeah.
Oh, Zach Hyman. So
Yeah.
technically he got a goal there.
Yeah.
Like, funny that it worked out that way. But yeah, you don't get that. And it is kind of it is amazing how the series has turned in that sense. One interesting thing you mentioned with Bobrovsky is that he's not making the saves anymore. And it is a glass half empty, glass half full, where it's like, where at the beginning of the series he was playing out of his mind, playing incredible, and looked like he actually was going to win the Conn Smythe trophy based on how he was playing in that early phase of the series. And now it's it's struggling. I kind of wonder, with that, is his struggling actually him just falling apart, or the Oilers starting to be more, I don't want to call it more accurate, there's more precision in their shots, where McDavid is starting to pick his corners, and I think he scored a goal in Game 5 where you could tell, like, he was looking for the weak spots in Sergei Bobrovsky's in really his stance, and picking him apart. I guess, I mean, this is really asking, I guess it depends on who you ask.
Sure.
Is it a glass half full or a glass half empty thing? Like, where do you see it with Bobrovsky, and I guess conversely with Skinner, like now he's playing really well and tight, really keeping the Oilers preserving those leads in the past 2 games. Where I guess what are you seeing from that from both goalies in that sense?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both when it comes to Sergei Bobrovsky. I think at the beginning of the series, he was so good that it would have been very hard for them to, or him to keep those numbers going. It was just inevitable at some point, even if the Oilers had gotten swept or lost in 5 or whatever the case might have been, they would have solved him at some point. They would have started scoring. To imagine that the Oilers would get like 1 goal in 3, like it wasn't realistic that he would continue to play that well. So yes, he's taken a step down a little bit. Um, but I also think that to answer the second part of that question, I think the Oilers have figured something out here. I think they're getting
Yeah.
better shots. They're taking more of them. They're working his blocker side, and they're not going as low as they were before. And to his defense, some of those goals that the Oilers are scoring on him, they're not really stoppable goals. If you look
Yeah.
at the Connor Brown breakaway, that was just a really smart move where he just outweighted Bobrovsky. When you look at the Henrique goal, that was a tip to Corey Perry goal on the McDavid pass. Who's stopping that? There's nobody stopping that, right? And a lot of the goals in the 8-1 victory, they weren't all against Bobrovsky. Some of them were against the backup. So he wasn't necessarily responsible for all of that. So it does create an interesting question. Can Bobrovsky find a
Yeah.
level somewhere in the middle of where he started and what he's been lately and get back closer to how the first 3 games went? Or is his confidence shaken? Now he's a veteran, so he may be not rattled, but as the Panthers would go, this series has completely shifted. You got to wonder going into Edmonton, are they thinking, man, the momentum is
Mhm.
completely on the Oilers side here? Bobrovsky's looked human. The Oilers have started picking things up. McDavid looks like he's going to be the Conn Smythe winner, win or lose this series.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of sealed that at this point.
Right. And then you go, okay, well, Zach Hyman has got 1 goal, but he hasn't exploded, and he's been the leading scorer for the Oilers. Nugent Hopkins hasn't done a whole lot. He's hit a bunch of posts. Evander Kane's not even playing. You've
Yeah.
got a lot of depth on the Oilers that are kind of their leading guys, and they haven't even broken out. We talked about Draisaitl, right? Like, I'm not sure if he's injured or dealing with something or it's just not
Yeah.
happened for him yet. One of 2 things is going to happen with Draisaitl. Either he's going to explode for a bunch of points in either game 6 or game 7, or he's dealing with something and he's having a hard time just keeping up and doing a pretty good job battling through something. I don't know what it is. I don't have any inside information on where Draisaitl's
Yeah.
at, but he's battled through a lot of stuff before, but he doesn't quite look like his normal Draisaitl self. So I'm wondering if something's up there, but
It is that thing with him where it does feel that way a lot of times where when he gets hurt, he's healthy enough to play,
yeah,
he's an 80% Draisaitl, which you'll take that over any other option. I
yeah,
said that about McDavid earlier in the playoffs, where a 70% McDavid you'll take over that.
yeah,
But an 80% Draisaitl, you could tell it's not the same. Like Leon Dry, we don't give him enough credit as a hockey society. We don't give him enough credit for how good he is because if he was on any other team, he'd be our far and beyond the best player on that team and one of the best and recognized as one of the best players in the game. When he's 80%, there's a bigger drop off just based on what he can do. And I think that's part of what you're looking at what he this series so far and then looking forward where him at 80%, can he really make a difference looking forward? Is he going to be able to return to form? You have to wonder what can happen moving forward with
yeah. It's
that.
interesting because if you take two players to compare, for example, like you look at a 50%, let's just say he's 50%. Let's say Draisaitl's
Yeah.
50%. 50% of Draisaitl is better than most people's 90 to 100%. And when he played in a series, last year and the year before, where he was really hurt against the Kings and in
Yeah.
Calgary, he was the leading scorer for the Oilers. Like he can
Mhm.
play really injured and play very, very well. Now, if you take a guy like Evander Kane, who the Oilers really would love to have right now, his physical stature, his ability to score when he's 50%, he's not nearly as effective as a Draisaitl at 50%. So then you have to go, okay, well, do we really want Evander Kane in the lineup if he's only half functional? Would we be better having a Derek Ryan or having a Matthias Janmark or having a Connor Brown or a Dylan Holloway? Like, are those guys Corey Perry? Should they be in the lineup instead of Evander Kane? And that's what they've chosen, right? They've said, okay, Evander Kane is not ready to go. He's clearly not even maybe 50%. Let's put these other guys in because their 100 is better than Evander Kane's 50. I don't know that there's too many other players on this Oilers roster, even in Florida, where their 90 to 100 is as good or better than Draisaitl's 50. So you're going to stick with Draisaitl, right? And you wonder if he will find a way, whether it's on the power play or something else. Will he will just start to score? And that's got to be the big concern for Florida, right? Is like if he on sort of just opens up that door and starts flooding in some of his points, which hasn't happened yet. that could be a real problem for the Panthers. So,
Yeah.
you never want to play against anybody's worst, but at the same time, you don't want Draisaitl to all of a sudden get healthy or explode because then you
Yeah,
have another problem on
I
your
guess
hands.
similarly, you don't want to start seeing Zach Hyman get hot. I
Right.
think it's kind of looking ahead in game six, and there might be a game seven, but for now, game six,
Right.
and then there's the possibility that there's game seven. I think to start, I really there's two questions where how do the Oilers continue to come back? We've seen the past two games, the blueprint. Then there's the how do the Panthers make sure it doesn't happen? We mentioned Bob Bobrovsky earlier, and I think that's where it starts. I wonder because you mentioned some of the goals aren't his fault. If the Panthers really want to seal this series, it would be about limiting those shooting lanes, forcing the Oilers to take difficult shots on net, which I think was what they were doing in
Hmm.
really games one and two, where the Oilers were getting a lot of shots, but were very bad shots. They weren't great necessarily, and it helped Bob Borowski out. So I do wonder first, like, yeah, let's start, I guess, with the Panthers and then with the Oilers, what the keys are. With the Panthers, they don't want to go back to Florida as much as yeah, you sell home tickets. You want to end the series right away. Make sure you don't have that pressure of a reverse sweep building, which has only happened four times in Stanley Cup playoff history and only once in the final when it happened before World War II. So basically, it's been a while.
Yeah.
You don't want that pressure to build up of a game seven. How do they seal the series? I think that's the big thing is limiting shooting lanes, just forcing ugly shots on net. What do you think needs to happen for the Panthers?
Well, there's a couple things going on here, probably. I love your point about how they don't know to go back to game seven because there was some talk. I don't believe it at all for a second, but there was some talk that they intentionally lost game four so they could go back and win it in Florida on game five, which is ridiculous. That's not,
Yeah,
nobody's doing that, especially a team coached by Paul Maurice. It's just not happening. But if
yeah,
that were the case, not like that was a mistake because now the Oilers are back in the series. But
yeah,
I think you're right. I think it's got to limit the shots. I think the Florida Panthers have to figure out a way to play on that physical edge and really run the Oilers, but not get into penalty trouble. And in the last game, they started to do that. And Paul Maurice said, look, we can't do this. We can't go into the penalty box a bunch of times. You kind of have to write off the 8-1 loss. You just pack that one and put it away because the Florida Panthers were just not very good. Like they just didn't play very well. That was probably their worst game of the playoffs.
you're talking about
So
the game four loss, right?
yeah, so the 8-1
Yeah,
loss.
that was like the burn the tape one.
Yeah, you just don't even look at that. Yeah. Don't even want to go back to it and look at that one because it's not indicative of what the Florida Panthers are like as a team. They played better in game five, but they weren't able to pull that one out. The Oilers were just better. But yeah, I think you just have to you play physical, you do what got you where you are, heavy forechecking team, blocking shots, playing like getting under the Oilers' skin, but just trying to do that without taking a bunch of penalties because it looks like there was a lot of nastiness and greasiness in this series to begin things, and the referees are starting to call some of that stuff. So it sways in the Oilers' favor if those power plays continue because it's only a matter of time
And
before they
I
start to
think on the
cash in on
same
those.
note, the series started out as that dirty series or slow. Really, once the series sped up a bit, or once the pace sped up, then all of a sudden the Oilers are getting that control. And really, I mean, that kind of feeds into McDavid's game a bit.
Hmm.
And I think that kind of leads into the Oilers. Is that the key to success? I like one of the things I'm thinking about with along with the speeding up the series is getting Hyman and Draisaitl cooking, which we've discussed about. But what is that? Yeah, is what for the Oilers? How do you keep this momentum? How do you make sure? Is it? I mean, I think one of them is just a very basic analysis: is score first and let the crowd cause an earthquake because they
Yeah.
will after that if they score early and Rogers place like that place will go wild and but what needs to happen in game six and then subsequently if they win game six what must happen in game seven.
I think there's three real key factors for me. One, you're right, get the home crowd into it. I think either way, if they don't score first, that audience or that crowd is going to really try to boost the Oilers forward. But I think it does help if you lay in a hit right away or forecheck heavily or you get a goal or you kill off a keep, like whatever it is that you got to do to get that crowd really amped up, I think will help the Oilers a lot. And I think Florida does not want to give the Oilers an opportunity to swing that momentum early. If they can get it, I think the other key is not to play that defensive hockey that they've
Yeah,
been known to play in some of these previous series, like against Dallas, where they won that game. They probably didn't deserve to win, the really close one where they just played on their heels for like the last two periods.
this is
I don't
like
think you
the
can.
this is like the Knobloch style where like you get
Yeah.
up a 2-0 lead and then you take 10 total shots on goal and play defense, and you're like, just don't do that.
Yeah, you
Not
can't
against the
do that. I mean,
Panthers.
at this point, Florida's one, too good, and two, if you do that and it doesn't work, you're out, right? Like the
Yeah.
Oilers are in elimination games from here
I
on in.
think
So
did it feel like that in game 5 a bit when they had a 3-0 lead, which they did? Did it feel that way or it didn't? Because like I go back and forth where it's like, yeah, it seemed like they let it, but it also seemed like no, because they did score later
yeah,
and they were pressing a bit. I think it almost goes both ways because in the sense that they allowed the Panthers to get those quick response goals and those quick goals
yeah.
right off the other. So I'm kind of wondering like, yeah, do they want to keep doing what they did in game 5 in the sense like keep pressing, keep the foot on the gas, which I guess to do that.
I think credit should go to Florida in game 5. I think a couple things happened. That Evan Rodriguez goal that he scored like right away, that
Yeah,
was a momentum booster for Florida.
not a bad signing.
When they got a goal, they really pushed harder. I thought Matthew Tkachuk, who'd been fairly silent in this series up until that game, started to play a lot better. The Oilers do not want to get him going because if they can get
Yeah,
him going, Florida's got a
and
chance to really fight their way back into this thing. So you don't want him getting
that
hot.
seems
And
like
he's
the key
been,
also, right? Like
yeah,
if Kachuk gets hot, then yeah,
right. So I think they want to avoid him doing that.
the Panthers. Kachuk needs to be what McDavid is now, kind of also,
Yeah.
right?
Well, they're
Yeah,
going to need somebody, whether it's Barkov or Kachuk or whoever. Florida's going to need somebody, Carter Verhaeghe, whoever, to step up and really try to take over a game. And there was this whole narrative that Barkov's going to be able to shut down and slow down McDavid, which he sort of was kind of getting away with for a while, but the reality is nobody's going to shut down
yeah,
McDavid completely, right? And now it doesn't look like he's even able to slow him down, and it looks like Barkov's starting to get a little frustrated, right? So that's a that's a problem for Florida if one of those guys. And I haven't heard much about Forsling at all. We talked about him early in the
yeah.
series that he
I
was going
think
to
that
be a
was the
difference
other
maker, and
note.
I don't think he's done a lot, in terms
Yeah,
of
I
really
think
being a difference maker for Florida.
just him. That was the other thing I was thinking about when you mentioned Barkov, because if Forsling starts, he's the guy who's like he has to limit their shooting. He has to play the shooting lanes, and basically, I would say you rather McDavid beat you as a scorer or as a passer? Usually, you'd say he's a better. I mean, he's a better playmaker. He has 8 assists in this series. That speaks for itself. I mean, he's the best player in the world. He could do it both ways. But based on the past few games, I would say allow him to force him to take that extra pass. If you're Forsling, you just want him, you don't want the puck on his stick. You just want someone else. So it does feel like Forsling and just the entire defense, like that's like almost another big thing for them, which easier said than done at this point because McDavid,
Yeah.
yeah, he will beat you as a passer now
Yo, yeah, I
almost.
mean, clearly you look at that game 5 alone, right? He
Yeah.
scores the third goal and he puts it off the inside ankle of Bobrovsky on just he finds a little seam coming to the outside and he just shoves it in. That's the way that Connor McDavid should and can score, and he does it a lot. It's surprising that up until this point he hasn't shot more, and that's been one of my bigger complaints about his game, even though you can't really complain that much, is that he could shoot more and he just chooses not to. But then when you think he might shoot again, he does what he did when he was dead tired at the end of the shift, goes around 3 Florida Panthers and then dishes it off to Corey Perry in an unbelievable move. You're like, well, what are you supposed to stop? Like, you can't stop the shot and you can't
Yeah.
stop the pass. So it's like, pick your flavor if you're the Florida Panthers, right? It's just really difficult to know what he's going to do. And even if you do, stopping what he's going to do, because he's just, even at the end of his shift, he's dynamically quick. And what you just hope that
Yeah.
he makes a mistake or you can contain him in some way, keep things to the outside. Like you just hope. And when you're crossing your fingers, it doesn't always lead to the best recipe of success.
Yeah. I guess to wrap up, do you see there's only been 4 reverse sweeps. I know we've got a game 6 ahead, and then before we get to game 7, and we may not be get to game 7 if the Panthers win, but there's only been 4 of these. The last one was a decade ago, the Kings sweeping the Sharks, and then the Flyers did it with the Bruins. But the last time it happened was not in the final was 1942.
Mm-hmm.
So this would actually be, I mean, you talk about series comebacks or great series. It would probably be the great, I mean, without debate, probably the greatest series comeback of all time. And I mean, not maybe not in sports history. I mean, it's hard to. There are some big series comebacks. I mean, really, the one in baseball with Boston beating the Yankees, and they had their reverse sweep. That's notable on its own. But the this one would be. Do you see it happening, or do you still want to set hedge your bets and say I still think the Panthers it's their series to lose?
Well, I think I originally predicted Oilers at
Yeah.
7.
Yeah.
So that would be what would have to happen if this is going to go through.
Yeah.
I think the key will be tomorrow night's game, depending on when people watch this video, Friday night. If the Oilers win that game handily, I think there's a real possibility that they end up winning game 7 because that momentum will have really shift. In terms of where that series would rank if they were able to pull this off, I'm with you. I think it's right up there because of the fact that the Canadian team hasn't won a Stanley Cup
Yeah.
in 19 years. The Oilers have McDavid on it. You're looking at the ratings for the Stanley Cup Finals recently, and they're really, really high. I think people are just really invested in this series. And the idea that it could have been a sweep and then all of a sudden it wasn't. I mean, it's just such a good storyline, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of things that became really interesting in the series that weren't interesting a week ago.
Yeah.
So it's
And I think on
fun.
that note, it's been like it's been like two different series already,
Yeah.
and then we got game 6 and 7. So we might have three different types of series in one series, which would just be like a bunch of chapters to this. It's really been incredible. Yeah,
Yeah, there's
remarkable.
just so much to talk about, right? And
Yeah.
if they are able to pull this out, even if they don't win, just to go to 7 and make it a game and make it a series, that's great for the NHL. That's great for the Oilers. That's great for hockey. It's just a lot of fun to see this series turn into something competitive when at first it looked like, oh man, this is going to be a wash. And this is going to be a sweep by Florida. And now it isn't. So I don't know that the Oilers are going to win game 6. I think Florida's got a lot of pushback, and I think people shouldn't be writing them off as quickly as it sounds like they might be doing in this game. But if they're able to handily win game 6 in Edmonton and the Oilers can move it to game 7, I think the Oilers got a really good shot.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I picked the Panthers. I think I picked them at 7, so I still would want to keep that prediction. I don't feel good about it at all. I think I think if game 6 is close, obviously there's more chance for the Panthers. But at the same time, when I hear that, when I think of a close game, I think of Edmonton. This game goes into overtime, and the Oilers win in overtime, and the devastation of losing in overtime for the Panthers. All of a sudden, you're just like, yeah, the series will feel. I think if the Oilers win, it will just feel over in the public eye more than it would. I mean, more than it would just because the Oilers won Game 6. Now it's all the pressure's building up for a reverse sweep. I I still think I mean, it's easier to win two games than it's easier to win one game than it is to win two. I think someone on Hockey Night in Canada said, I think it was Kevin BX has said that on Hockey Night in Canada. It's easier to win two games than it is to win one. And if the Panthers were thinking that way, they can. I think the Oilers, this is actually been the story of their season, which has been the slow start. They have when they were down 3-0, you could tell. I mean, you had a feeling that Knobloch went in and said, "We've won 4 games in a row before. We
Yeah.
could do it again." They won 17 in a row earlier in the season. So, I mean, I'm still thinking it's easier the Panthers, but I don't feel good about it. I would want to see the Oilers complete this reverse sweep. Would really give us one of these series. This has been the most fun series I've watched in a while. Most fun since covering the NHL, and I'm just really excited. So and I guess to wrap up, Jim, any articles you're working on? I mean, obviously you're working on some stuff because it's the finals going on,
Yeah.
right? And ton of stuff going on. But what any big articles in the works that you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm covering the basic game
Yeah.
action and what's happening in the series and the storylines and narratives that are coming out of each individual game. But there's interestingly a lot of talk about this roster while this series is going on. There's,
Mhm.
talk that Draisaitl, McDavid, and Evan Bouchard have all agreed to stick around and they want to be here long term and they want to sign those deals. Talking about potentially re-signing Connor Brown, that Matthias Janmark is looking to stick around, that maybe Vincent Desharnais is going free agent. Like, there's a lot of storylines, even though the action should be focused squarely on the
Yeah.
games. It's not. There's so
Mhm.
much stuff going on, and you talk about the draft and free agency and Ken Holland being at the end of his contract in a few days. Like, there's just a lot surrounding this team right now. So there's a never ending supply of things to talk about for sure.
Yeah, there's like it's a funny how much off-season stuff happened, especially in the recent days. And meanwhile, the finals going on, and I'm still in finals mode where I'm like, I'm just focusing on the final, and the draft will come up. We'll get to that soon, but there's just so much going on in this final that it's like it's hard to ignore, and
Yeah.
it's really just the storylines coming out of this series it. Yeah, game 6 hopefully be exciting. Game 7, hopefully we get a game 7. We're rooting for that. So yeah, I guess that's all we got. So
Yeah.
hopefully oh, we'll see where we're at later next week because hopefully there is a game seven. Hopefully uh you'll be celebrating 'cause Jim, you cover the NHL at large, but Oilers fan at heart. How it would feel to, I don't know if you remember the last time
Oh
they
yeah, I'm
won.
old enough to remember them all.
All
So
right. So
yeah.
because it's been a while, so celebrate. It would be probably like one of those like crazy moment, like wild moment where I know you're a writer, you have done with bias, but to finally see the Oilers win it, that would be special. So hopefully that happens. That's what I'll be rooting for. I didn't pick that, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. But yeah, that's all we got. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, comment, and watch this watch it again, watch this podcast again. And thank you for joining for episode 7. This is the we got some good ones. Phil Esposito, Von Taves, we've got two Kachucks, Brent Seabrook, and of course we gotta mention Tim Horton. This is the Tim Horton episode. So when he was on the Maple Leafs, that is. So thank you for watching, and we'll be back next time for another great episode. Thank you.